Hey guys, it's Rob here for Beyond the Brush, and today I'd actually like to talk about brushes. I've gone through a fair amount of brushes in my time. I've tried various different manufacturers. As you can see here, we've got a Winsor & Newton, Raphael, a Rosemary & Co, and one of the WAMP brushes, and a Da Vinci. And I've tried all of these out on various models, and I've bought brushes in the past because a famous painter said I use these brushes. The Raphaels I think I bought because one of the French painters used them, and I'd heard about the Rosemary & Co's and the Da Vinci's and things like that. But in all the time that I've been using brushes, I've found that there is one basic rule for brushes, and that's very simply, can they hold a point? That's it. That's all a brush needs to do. So what I mean by that is, you can see on the end of the brush, this one's dry, so it's kind of furred out a little bit. But if you get it slightly wet, so I've just got a little pot of water, and then just sort of dry it off a little bit, and there you go. Dry off, there we go. So that is holding a point quite nicely. I'll bring it closer if I can. There we go. So this is a size 0 from this is a Raphael. It's fairly well used. It's one of my workhorse brushes that I use on a regular basis, but it still holds a point, and you can see that's quite a nice point there. I've got other brushes, all of these other brushes. These are all quite capable of holding points. Again, this one's dry, so there we go. Nice point on that. And that's it. That is the only thing you need to worry about when picking a brush. You'll find that some brushes, like this one here, this I believe is the Da Vinci. Yeah, Yes, this is the Da Vinci brush. Again, it's a 0. I tend to use zeros more than anything else. I don't tend to use really tiny brushes, because if you can find one that gives you a good point, you don't really need to. And what you'll find is that some brushes have a smaller length of bristle to others and things like that. So for example, here's a comparison. So you can see you've got fairly different lengths of bristles, but again, the only thing that's important is, will it make a point, and will it also hold the point whilst you're brushing? So you can see there, I'm brushing along this surface, and the brush is quite happily keeping that point on the end. That is it, basically. That's the only thing you need to worry about. If you're buying a brush, I would recommend trying to find somewhere where you can actually pick up the brushes and try them out, and actually go along and sort of wet them slightly, and then sort of brush them down a finger or something like that to see if they'll keep the point, and see if they'll even make one in the first place and things like that. If most good art shops should let you do that. If you find one that doesn't, worry, because the chances are they don't trust their brush suppliers. But yeah, most good art shops should let you do that. The only other thing I would say about brushes is, the one thing you'll notice is that all of these are what they call Kolinsky sable, Rosemary & Co. All that means is that it's a particular particular fur from an animal. And you can get, I think there's essentially 3 different grades of brush. You can get synthetic brushes, which you can use, but they're not great. They're usually quite cheap. There are sable brushes, which are natural hair and are sort of fairly good, and there are Kolinsky sable brushes, which are sort of the high end of sable brushes. Luckily, the sizes that sort of miniature painters need them in, sort of 0, 1, sort of maybe a 2, aren't that expensive. You can pick up a brush like this for, say, so sort of £4 or £5. So you're talking sort of like the price of a standard model these days. So maybe sort of like, I don't know, $7 or $8, something along those lines. I'm not sure about American prices. You know, if you're sort of an artist on sort of canvas painting, for example, you can end up paying hundreds of pounds for a brush. It gets quite ridiculous, but because we need such small brushes, they're usually fairly cheap. So I would recommend getting the best brush you possibly can. It is the single item you will use the most, simply because it's a brush. It's what you need to do this. I would basically spend as much as you can on your brush. Manufacturer, again, largely irrelevant. If you can, pick a brush that you like, pick a brush out of the shop that actually works for you. I will admit I haven't tried any of the new Games Workshop brushes, so I don't know how good they are. I know they do was it the Artificia range or something on those lines that's apparently sort of Kolinsky sable, but I'm not sure. But again, it's all down to personal preference. Essentially, find a brush you like, use it for a while, get used to it, work out whether you like it or not. I found that for me personally, I've got quite used to the WAMP brushes. It's a UK website. I think it stands for We Are Miniature Painters. I'm not entirely sure, but they did a Kickstarter for brushes. And they did a fair old set of brushes. They've got detail, fine detail, base coats, large base coat, things like that. And they're actually really good. I quite like them, has to be said. I've tried Da Vinci's. I didn't really get on with Da Vinci's too well. I found them a bit too short. They didn't tend to contain much paint. But again, that might be, you know, sort of a shorter brush might be sort of easier for you to control. So you might like it better. Raphael's fairly good brush, quite like them. It's the series 8404 are the particular ones, and these are again Kolinsky, that's the word you're looking for, and they tend to have a longer sort of longer bristles, so you basically sort of store more paint in them. It's good for sort of glazing, and this brush you can see right there, that's a perfect example. This brush is beginning to give out. I literally just brushed it along my hand and it split into 2 points. That's bad. What that tells you is that inside the metal bit, the ferrule, is paint, and that's causing the brushes, the bristles to sort of split apart. So that you have to be careful of, but you can see, you know, it will make a point, but you have to be careful because, you know, sort of eventually when you're painting, it'll all of a sudden split apart into two sets of bristles, and you'll get paint where you don't want it. You can paint with what I call junk brushes, but in all honesty, all you're going to do is cause yourself pain, basically. All of these brushes are perfectly acceptable. You can see they all make pretty good points. And yeah, it's essentially down to sort of what you like. There is no perfect brush. There is no sort of this is the brush you must buy. And this is what I found. You know, I've got Raphael's, I've got Winsor & Newton, I've got Rosemary & Co, I've got WAMP brushes, I've got Da Vinci brushes, I've got a whole bunch of other brushes sort of randomly bought. I've got a few of the old GW ones before they produced the Artificia range. And in all honesty, it's the one rule that I've found about brushes is if it'll make a point. If you can get a brush to make a point like that, then that's a brush you can use. If it won't make a point, if it repeatedly splits into multiple multiple points, or it sort of won't take a point at all. I'll see if I've got an example. Let's try this one. So here we have I don't know, it's one of the cheapo Winsor & Newtons. It's a small round Galeria, and this is probably one that you'll find in a sort of in an art shop quite happily. And it's this is, I believe, synthetic, and you can see that at the moment it's fairly dry, and there's no way that's making a point. You can see there's bristles pointing out in all sorts of directions. So I'm going to try and get this to make a point. So I've dampened it slightly, and you can see that no matter how many times I do this, there is no way that that brush is going to make a point at all in any way, shape or form. Just not going to happen. So that's junk. That is pretty much useless, to be honest. So yeah, throw it away, stick it in a pot to be used for PVA, whatever you want to do to it. And that's essentially it, really. There is no magic behind brushes. You know, sort of get the best you can. Kolinsky Sable is sort of pretty much the best. Which manufacturer you go for is largely up to you. It kind of depends sort of what your shop's got in, or if you have to order, if you sort of live in the middle of nowhere and you have to order online, then unfortunately you're sort of kind of taking part in a lottery really as to whether you get a good brush. But yeah, that's it. Will it take a point? Can you make your brush take a good point, and will it hold it whilst you actually paint with it? This is dried out now, so it's not going to, but there you go. So just dampen the brush, you know, sort of little pot of water or something on those lines, or if you're absolutely desperate, you can use saliva, you know, sort of stick it in your mouth and use your tongue to make a point, but wouldn't recommend it. And that's it, really. You know, sort of, if your brush will make a point, you can paint with it. Doesn't really matter what it's made out of. I mean, Kolinsky Sable's nice because it has that sort of nice bend to it and all that kind of thing, but whatever. There you go. That's it, really. Job done. Will it hold a point? Alright, cheers for watching. I'll see you later.